Hey guys, welcome back to the Rabbit Hole Radio. My name is Megan. In today's video, we're going to be digging through the digital archives of the internet. We're going to take a look at how chaotic internet culture was in the early 2000s and how it shaped everything we do online today. Let's dive in. I know every generation says this about something, but when it comes to the internet, kids today generally would not survive what we had. The internet is now clean, it's curated, it's algorithm fed, it's polished. Everything has rules, community guidelines, brand deals, content strategies, and somebody trying to sell you a course on how to become the next biggest influencer. But the early 2000s internet, the place was a lawless wasteland. It felt like walking into a dark carnival ran by sleep deprived teenagers and criminals. There were no guardrails. You clicked the wrong button and your family computer got 14 viruses. You trusted strangers for absolutely no reason. And you would download songs from LimeWire called Linkin Park underscore full album underscore real dot MP3, and you just prayed that it would work. And sometimes you would wait hours and hours and hours just for a song to download, and then all of a sudden you get a sound clip of this.
Say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Because there's no moderators and anyone can just upload anything they wanted onto LimeWire, all the files were just completely random. Sometimes it would be the song, or sometimes it would be Bill Clinton saying what he said in that clip. And it happened to a lot of people because that became one of the most memorable things about LimeWire. Every website honestly looked like it was designed by someone during a caffeine overdose. Flashing banners, glitter text, autoplay music. Oh my gosh, autoplay music was the most it was a really cool feature at the time, but if you click on somebody's profile, mostly on MySpace where it happened, you would click on it and music would just start blaring at you. But it did have its annoying tendencies too, like it'd be dead silent or whatever, and then you click on someone's profile and it would scare the living shit out of you. Or you'd be listening to your own music, then all of a sudden someone else's music is playing over top of that, creating a lot of overstimulation. But that's just how the internet was at the time. Back then, being online felt dangerous, exciting, stupid, creative, and deeply unserious all at once. Now the internet just feels like a shopping mall, very predictable. But back then, it felt like a back alley behind the shopping mall where weird things would happen. And the craziest part of it all, a lot of us on the internet back then were just children. Children who were unsupervised, online at midnight, talking to strangers with random usernames like XXDarkAngel420XX, and nobody asked questions about it. It was just normal. So today, I want to go back to the cursed golden ages of the internet. We'll be talking about MSN emotional welfare, AIM chaos, MySpace destroying friendships with the top 8 rankings, YouTube before rules existed, and all the horrible things children should have never had access to. Because if you weren't there, you truly cannot understand how unhinged it was. It was insane. And if you were there, you might be entitled to some sort of compensation. Before news feeds, before followers, before likes, before people built careers online, there was instant messaging. MSN and AIM, AOL, or AIM, there's a whole controversy about AIM, AIM, of what it was actually called. But they were some of the first places millions of young people experienced the social life outside of school and family. I know all that sounds normal now, but at the time, it was revolutionary. For the first time, you could go home from school, log on to the family computer, and continue your social life in real time. That changed everything. Before this era, once you left school, conversations usually ended until the next day. If someone liked you, hated you, was mad at you, or wanted to spread gossip, they had to wait. But instant messaging removed that pause. Now drama had business hours, 24/7. And because this was one of the first digital social spaces for teens, people had no idea how to behave. No one knew how much was too much. No one knew what boundaries looked like. No one knew what oversharing was. So we invented modern internet behavior in real time. Display names became identity statements. You weren't just your first and last name. You were XX, shattered soul, XX, star, squiggly thing, misunderstood star, squiggly thing. Input, I am currently listening to Evanescence. Your name, your font choices, symbols, song lyrics all became early forms of personal branding. Except nobody would have called it that. And instead of texting somebody directly telling them you were upset about something, you'd put your display name as funny how people change, or I am so over him, broken heart, broken heart, broken heart. Now 10 people were trying to figure out who you were talking about. It was subtweeting before Twitter existed. And then came one of the strangest rituals of the era, logging in and out repeatedly so some person would notice you and start talking to you. That notification sound mattered, and it could cause so much adrenaline because maybe it was your crush, maybe it was your bestie with the latest gossip, maybe it was your enemy ready to ruin your evening. And while these eras feel nostalgic now, it also had a much darker side. These platforms had very little safety compared to today. Children could talk to strangers easily, people lied about their age constantly, catfishing was more common before the word became mainstream. Harassment was often treated like a joke. It was freedom without education. But still, for an entire generation, this was the first taste of living two lives, one offline and one online. And once that started, society never really went back.
MySpace.
If MSN and AIM are private social lives, MySpace is what built your identity. This was one of the first major platforms where everyday people were expected to build a profile representing who they were. That sounds basic now, but at the time, it was a cultural shift. Before social media profiles, identity was mostly local. Your reputation only existed in school, your neighbors, your workplace, or your friend group knew who you were. But suddenly, your identity had a homepage, and everyone had to answer a new question. How do I present myself online? For many teenagers, MySpace was the first time they could consciously curate who they wanted to be. You picked a profile photo carefully, you chose your profile song carefully, you decorated your page carefully. Even if your profile looked chaotic, terrible, and just all over the place, that's what made it so special. It was messy, expressive, and personal. MySpace profile pages were combinations of glitter text, broken layouts, custom backgrounds, neon fonts, embedded music, and suspicious code copied from random websites. But underneath all the chaos was something important. People were learning how to digitally express themselves. MySpace also allowed users to publicly rank their closest friends 1 through 8. This feature of the website was so socially destructive, it almost feels fictional now. Just think about how insane and how chaotic that is. Not only did friendship become visible, it also became numerical. Who moved up on your profile, who got removed from your top 8, and did you just get replaced by someone from your math class that you don't even know and you had no idea your friends was even friends with them? Real arguments happened because of the rankings on the website. Entire friendship groups got destroyed because of it. People even got into physical altercations with people that they were once friends with because they got removed from the top 8. But also publicly ranking your friends like that, it predicted something much deeper. It was the first time social media turned relationships into visible status, and that logic never left, even to this day. We still have follower counts, likes, verification badges, views. MySpace introduced the idea that social value could be displayed publicly, but it also became a major hub for music culture. Bands built their fan bases there. The alternative scene thrived there. Local artists could suddenly reach people outside of their town. For emo, pop punk, scene, indie, and underground music culture, MySpace mattered. You no longer needed a TV or radio to be seen. That idea would explode later on YouTube, TikTok, and every platform after it. While MySpace was very chaotic and just all over the place, it taught millions of people how to exist online as a version of themselves. And if it wasn't for MySpace taking off the way it did, like if millennials and Gen Z never got on board with it, I don't think there'd be social media to this day, which is kind of crazy to think about. Leave this in the comments. What do you think the world would be like right now if the internet and social media just did not take off the way it did? Where do you think the world would be right now? Because we rely so much on our cell phones, social media, and just use the internet for absolutely everything. But if that wasn't there, and if MySpace didn't take off the way it did and not build ground for other social media platforms like Facebook and eventually Instagram, do you think the world would have been better off that way? Or do you think it's a good thing that social media and everything became what it is today? Let me know in the comments. Before avatars were normal, before virtual cosmetics made billions of dollars, before people casually lived through social media and digital characters, there was Gaia Online. And for a lot of people, Gaia wasn't just a website, it was an escape hatch. If platforms like MySpace were about presenting your real life identity online, Gaia offered something different. You could become whoever you wanted. And that mattered more than people realize. For many teens, especially awkward, isolated, creative, anxious, or for those who struggled socially, the internet was a place identity felt flexible. On Gaia, your face didn't matter, your hometown didn't matter, your popularity at school didn't matter. What mattered was your avatar, your humor, your writing, and your forum reputation. That was powerful. For some users, it was the first time they felt socially accepted. For others, it was the place they experimented with personality, confidence, aesthetics, and community. And there was even economy on there. Gaia had virtual currency, collectibles, marketplace trading, rare items, inflation, flex culture, and status symbols. Which means many kids accidentally got introduced to economics through anime accessories. People learned about supply and demand before algebra. Users obsessed over rare wings, halo items, limited drops, marketplace flips, and looking rich in pixels. And if you had those rare items, you were somebody. I know it looks really silly, but this predicted the future perfectly. Today in games, we have NFTs, digital cosmetics, creator merch, social status through possessions, and parasocial identities. Gaia Online was doing primitive versions of that years earlier. And then came the forums. People made threads about that got a lot of attention where drama, roleplay, advice, art, relationships, and just random nonsense at 2 a.m. For many users, Gaia was less about gaming and more about belonging. It was one of those internet spaces where community formed because people were there constantly, not because an algorithm pushed them together. And like many early internet spaces, it also had a lot of problems. People were being scammed constantly. It was a breeding ground for predators. A lot of people had clicks on there and would exclude you. There was weird power users that had like a power trip. A lot of people overly invested themselves into people they don't know, and it turned into chronic online behavior before we had a language for it. People still use Gaia Online today, and I know it may look like it's for children or whatever, but I promise you it's not. There's a lot of people on there who were over 30 years old that still use the forums and stuff. It's definitely not a website for kids, just a little PSA. But despite all of that, Gaia represents something people deeply miss. An internet where imagination was social. You didn't just scroll content, you built a tiny world and lived in it. And for a lot of people, that little world mattered more than anybody knew.
Shut up!
Early YouTube barely resembles the platform we know today. YouTube is polished now. There are thumbnails engineered for clicks, retention graphs, brand partnerships, studios, managers, content calendars. But in the early 2000s, it was a place where people could upload whatever they wanted just because they could. Early YouTube was exciting because video creation suddenly became accessible. You no longer needed TV networks, production companies, or even industry approval. If you had a webcam and had internet access, you could publish something and anything to the world. It didn't matter what it was. But that became revolutionary. It created a new type of celebrity. They weren't actors, they weren't musicians, not broadcasters. They were just ordinary people with a bubbling personality. But because there was no mature creator economy yet, people weren't optimizing for sponsorships. They were optimizing for attention. And attention often rewards extremes. So early YouTube became full of shock humor, dangerous stunts, offensive skits, conspiracy theory videos, absurd randomness, really cringy humor, and low effort geniuses. It was creative freedom mixed with zero restraint. Many creators said and did things that would immediately be condemned now. And to be fair, much of it should be, but cultural context matters. The internet often treated edginess as bravery. Saying outrageous things was mistaken for being funny, fearless, or authentic. But that was common across online culture, not just YouTube. But then came advertisers, and advertisers do not pay to sit behind chaos. So that's when the platform started to change. Policies tightened, monetization shaped behavior, creators became a business. Then that weird amateur carnival slowly became a professional media ecosystem. In some ways, that improved quality. In other ways, it reduced spontaneous behavior. One of the least talked about truths of the old internet is how easily children encountered disturbing material. Today, many people imagine the early web as nostalgic, harmless, and it's true, some parts of it were, but the other parts of it were absolutely unhinged, disturbing, and quite frankly, very dangerous. Obviously, I'm not going to be showing any of the material that was presented to millennials and Gen Z alike through the internet, but this is the definition of what shock content is, and that's the only photo I'm going to be showing. So sorry if this part is a little bit boring, but yeah, it is what it is. There was a culture of sending people links as a joke. The humor was often based off deception. You thought you were clicking on something funny, weird, or interesting, but instead you got very gross content, graphic images, pornographic material, animal cruelty clips, medical trauma videos, and deliberately upsetting material. And because moderation systems were weak or just non existent, much of it circulated freely. And I bet some of you are wondering, why did this become a thing? Why was this trendy? Why did you guys let this thrive? And it's because early internet culture often rewarded desensitization. If something shocked you, people laughed at your reaction. If you could watch horrible things unfazed, that was treated like social toughness. Honestly, that is deeply unhealthy and just not good for anybody, but it was very common at the time. And also, curiosity played a role in those factors too. The internet was still very mysterious. People clicked because anything could be behind the link. There was novelty and uncertainty, but for many people, that era shared a memory. Seeing intense stuff far too young, no parents even understood what was happening, schools were falling behind on it, platforms were immature, and users were experimenting without limits. The old internet offered a lot of freedom without limitations, but unfortunately, it was usually children that paid the price for a part of that freedom. People often ask why the internet feels different now, and the answer is it's because the internet changed from a culture into economy. In the early years, much of the web was built by hobbyists, weirdos, enthusiasts, anonymous communities, and early adopters. As it became mainstream, bigger forces entered. Advertisers, investors, governments, major corporations, Once serious money enters a space, unpredictability becomes a liability. And then smartphones decided to enter the chat and circulated everything. The internet was no longer a destination you visited on a desk. It became the environment you lived inside. That meant more adults online, more children online, more businesses online, more politics involved. And that's when the internet started to have way more consequences. Instead of thousands weird independent websites, people began spending time inside a handful of giant apps. That changed discovery. Instead of browsing the web, you scrolled feeds, and feeds replaced wandering. Optimization replaced randomness, personal brands replaced usernames, safety improved in many ways. The internet became cleaner, smoother, more additive, and more profitable. This question creates endless arguments because people are usually comparing feelings, not systems. The old internet felt better to many people because it felt smaller, more human, more surprising, less performative, less corporate. But feelings can hide the reality of a situation too, because it was also a lot more cruel, less safe, more explosive, more chaotic, and there's a lot more tolerance for harassment. What many people miss is not the danger, they miss the discovery. They miss when being online felt like exploring. They miss when people posted badly lit nonsense instead of strategic identity management. They miss when the culture felt accidental. Today, much of the internet feels like everyone knows they're being watched, and it's because they are. So, was the old internet better? In some ways, yes. In many ways, no. It was a lot more free, but freedom without guardrails has a cost. The old internet felt alive because nobody fully controlled it. That made it a lot more creative, that made it weird, but it also made it memorable. But it was also reckless, hostile, and dangerous. Today's internet is safer in many ways, but it often feels flattened by metrics, branding, and algorithms. But back in the early 2000s, humans were very messy online. And people these days, they are tiny media companies. Somewhere in between total chaos and total corporation control, there was probably a version of the internet that people actually wanted that curated to both. If you made it this far, thank you. You get a gold star. But I really appreciate everyone who took the time to watch and listen to me and just go on this random ADHD deep dive with me. If you have anything you want to add to the culture back then, leave a comment below. Hit that like button so more deep dive enthusiasts can go on this deep dive with us. And if you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.